Social media background checks, the future or happening right now? Are companies taking a deep dive into your social media to decide whether to hire you or not? Legal? Not legal? What do you think? My guest today, Bianca Lager, is here to tell us all about it. Hey, Bianca, welcome to the HR and Leadership Spotlight Show.
Hey, Chuck. Thanks so much. Happy to be here.
Excellent. Excellent. I am excited to have you on today. Number one, for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's extremely relevant in what's going on in our country, in our world today, in regards to the HR and the employment and the hiring space and the political discussions and the social media stuff. I mean, it's just out of control, and it's crazy. It's very interesting. So in that way, it's relevant. And number two, I've been an HR professional, HR director, recruiter for years and years. And what you're doing in your company really hits home for me. So I guess actually, before we get started, and I'm just so excited. I'm going on and on. Tell me what you brought for us today. Our tradition is we have a little mug or...
Yeah, well, I'm on brand with my social intelligence mug here. But, we thought we'd also point out old Al behind me. Albert Einstein, he's always watching over my shoulder. Some cool street art I got in New Orleans on a conference trip once. And I just like the interesting colors and also the reminder to, aim for brilliance if you can. Aim for intelligence when you can.
I love that. And I can't really see what's on your whiteboard behind you, but it just looks like you are just brainstorm. Lots of stuff going on there. Right. So social intelligence, online background screenings. God, tell us all about it.
It's a lot. I hope you have a minute. It's a lot. And, I think to start off, I think most people might have a spike of anxiety when you're thinking about it, or might think of, have an opinion. And, what our company does is social media screening for employment purposes. So what we're trying to provide is a solution for employers and candidates alike, because at the end of the day, this company was founded on the belief that your boss shouldn't be looking at your Facebook page. They shouldn't be digging through your pictures and, creating their own narrative about who you are. If they do have concerns or want to kind of have more of an insight, there are certain business-related reasons that they might want to do that. So we try to level the playing field for everyone and say, well, yes, you have concerns, and there's some obvious stuff that employers are concerned about: violence, hate speech, racism, intolerance, sexism, sexually explicit stuff, potentially criminal activity like theft, drugs, things like that. Things that matters, things that could disrupt the workplace, things that do disrupt the workplace. That, and one of the quotes that I use all the time that a client told me at a trade show once is, it happened in the workplace and ended up online, or it happened online and ended up in the workplace. So now, today, everywhere, especially now more than ever after, during the pandemic and work from home stuff, HR is really involved with how relationships are playing out online, or how things like bullying and hostility and harassment, how social media plays a part in that. And they are having to confront these things. And so the willy-nilly idea of, well, I'm just going to go do my own investigation, that's problematic, because now your boss, your HR person, your colleagues, your coworkers are taking a look at all sorts of things that you may or may not want them to see. Even if you have a public profile and you're pretty open about stuff, they're still kind of creating potential biases. At best, it's none of their business, and at worst, it's might create some bias or discrimination against you. So the idea really is that, hey, employers, Do you have valid reasons why you might want to be
Mhm.
concerned about what's going on in someone's social media? Yes. Let's define those. Let's get a legal formalized process in order, outsource that, and make sure that the candidate has transparency into what's going on, is aware of what's happening, and has methodology to dispute it, to make sure that the information is correct, and that you have solid documentation that if you do need to make an employment decision, that you can, it's actionable. You have a report here that you can either document, you can take action on however you see fit. But that's formalized. It isn't just, well, I also had a recruiter tell me once, yeah, I look at their Instagram and see if they take too many selfies or pictures of food. And then I don't move them on. It's like, I don't know if that was a qualifier for the job description there. So,
Right.
so that's it in a nutshell, but there's a lot of questions around it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So what is that report? I'm just trying to envision. So, all right, so I'm a recruiter, right? And I'm hiring, and I may not Google everybody just because, I'm hiring, but we're
The
hiring
bandwidth, you can't.
we're hiring a CFO. We're hiring the CFO. We're hiring a senior accountant, let's say, or we're hiring an HR manager. Okay, and I might think I know them, and that sort of thing. But what does your report show? Does it show like you said how many drinks they've had? Does it show like what are you uncovering, and then what are you revealing to the employer? Let's say what's that dynamic?
Sure. Yeah. And that's really important part of it all. So, importantly, that process of how it all, what are we looking at? I talk about this a lot. Business related behaviors is something we need to focus on. And I think for the most part, employers have the mindset, and certainly we have the mindset, you're not trying to like catch someone in a lie, necessarily, or be like, they're totally different online, than who they seem. A lot of stuff is, potentially, again, disruptive workplace stuff that people may not even realize is offensive, or things that could be against a code of conduct, against a policy, or that they are very blatant about that stuff. So it depends. But that's really why you have to have a really solid set of behaviors and definitions that you're looking for. And it's complicated. Okay. When an employer says, I'm worried about hate speech. Well, what is hate speech? Who says? Is social intelligence supposed to be the hate speech king and decide what is hate speech or not? And so we go through a rigorous process of understanding social media behavior, understanding language and how people use it in different contexts, sarcasm, innuendos, slang words, all sorts of things. We turn to experts, right, and resources. And what they help us do is define these things really, really carefully. And the four main categories, main buckets of information that most employers are worried about is intolerance, which is sort of a very large bucket. It's hate speech, sexism, racism, things like that. Violence, potentially criminal activity, and sexually explicit material. And there's variances within those, and certainly some customizations. But those are, categorically things that employers are like, yep, no, that's it. You can really slice those up in lots of different ways, but in the broad context, like those are the main things. And so what we do again is work really carefully to define what that means. When we're talking about criminal activity, what kind of criminal activity, and against whose laws, the US, which state, and, things like that. Hate speech, we have something called the Social Intelligence Intolerance Database, we've called it. And we, turn to credible sources to help us define hate slurs, hate symbols, hate groups, different kinds of things that are involved in terrorist activity, like the FBI, like the NAACP, like the Southern Poverty Law Center, places that have libraries and keep this information so that we can reference that. And that's an important part of the process. So what the report does, and to answer your question specifically, is take all of that intelligence, the social intelligence part
Yeah,
of it,
I
and
love
then
that name.
understand it's a good name.
Yeah.
But that is literally what we do is trying to interpret behavior in an intelligent way, and give employers very specific. We found this on Facebook. It happened in 2019. It was an original post by this person. They wrote it themselves. It was intolerant for this reason. This is the reference point, the source that we point to say why it's categorized as intolerant. And here's a screenshot of what that exact comment was. But what we are removing from the report is any protected class information about the candidate. So, for example, a candidate says, I belong to such and such church, and I just love the church, but I hate these types of people, or I use the N word in the same sentence, or something, extreme, more not extreme. What we're doing is avoiding the employer from being exposed to the information about what church they go to, because that's not the relevant part of the post, right? And it isn't. And it also is potentially like, hey, you didn't fire me because I used the word, you fired me because of what church I go to, kind of a thing. So the idea is to really focus on the actionable and the business related content. And it's like a criminal report, so that if there's a crime, so to speak, if there's a piece of negative flagged content, we call it flag content, that we find, we alert the employer and let them know and show them, give as much detail as possible. And if there's not, you get a report that says, hey, we found their LinkedIn, we found their Facebook, found their Twitter, nothing crazy over here. All is well, essentially. And that's it. So most of the time, that's what comes back on folks. I mean, most of the time, just like criminal reports, there's no history of that. So when there is, we try to be as detailed and defined as possible, and concise, so that they're also not getting a command F of the F word 500,000 times. That is fairly innocuous to the job too. So it's the product design and the concepts of how we have to report information. It's something we really think deeply about, really closely. I mean, I guess that's why old Al is over here for inspiration for us to...
Well, I mean, I'm just sitting here blown away. So what you're telling me is it's not a bunch of kids sitting in their parents' basement searching the internet and coming up with all kind of stuff.
Not quite. Yeah, no. It's a lot more work than that.
You're in your own basement now.
A lot more lawyers are involved.
I'll bet. And one thing I saw, just as I did a little bit of research, and I want to pivot on some other contemporary things happening in the news. But one thing with you, though, is you're aligned with the Fair Credit Reporting Act.
Yeah, we're a consumer reporting agency. So it's what happened is this company is founded in 2010. And 2011, the Federal Trade Commission, who was primarily tasked with consumer privacy situations at the time, caught wind of it. That's a whole story about how they caught wind of it. But anyway,
another show, folks.
Basically got ratted out. But anyway, fairly so, to say, hey, what are these guys doing? Is this fair? Is this right? Is this legal? What should we do here? And so the Federal Trade Commission did an audit, had professionals come out, and came to our offices, monitored and watched how we did things, took a review of the product design, the sales, everything. The disclosure and authorization process that it had been advised to set up. And they came out and if you Google social intel, FTC, you'll find their opinion letter. It came out and said, yeah, okay, what you're producing is a consumer report. You're a consumer reporting agency. So far, you're living up to the FCRA. We reserve the right to check back on you later. And so that's about as best as you can get. Yeah. But it was a really important and pivotal, really.
Absolutely.
And everybody who's come to market since has used that and leveraged that situation that was obviously not very fun for us. But the outcome really made it clear about what the rules were. And so just like a criminal report, and we partner with those kind of traditional background screen companies, so that what this is that it is a part of one of those packages generally. And so it makes it really clear, and that's where we are. That's our lane. That's in terms of, and as your extensive experience knows, there's a process for this. There's a timing thing. There's rules of when you can do background checks and when you can't, what you need signed, and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
And so it fits right into that process. And so, without just saying, oh, it's FCRA compliant, I mean, there's a lot of very specific things that we have to live up to. Maximum possible identity is one, to making sure we get the right John Smith in Los Angeles.
Absolutely.
So all those kinds of things you have to live up to. And then importantly, like I mentioned, like criminal reports or like any other background check you get in an employment purpose setting, you have the right to dispute it, and you have the right to say, wait a minute, I think you got that wrong about me.
So it follows the same thing, pre-adverse action letter.
Yes.
And wow. Okay.
Exactly.
And so I guess the thing that sparked me, just wanted to ask you, is do people even know they're getting their social media background check, or do they sign a waiver? Like if I was going to do the standard criminal background check,
Yes.
on someone, the background check companies always want that waiver signed, and we put it in the application. Like we cover ourselves, they cover.
Yep.
Do people know they're getting their social media background checked?
If they're reading the documents, they should know. Not only that, but when you are signing your relevant background check information, I think it's important for folks to know that this could be a part of it. And that when they're saying, hey, we're going to do all relevant, some of the language, it depends on the client and really their lawyer to use what language they feel is necessary. So sometimes the language is vague, is to say relevant background checks, right? Or necessary, or some language like that. So I think it's important for folks to know that this is a possibility. Generally speaking, you can also ask the HR people what is included as well, so that specifically. I think though that for the most part, the effort is to inform people really carefully. Do folks read every line of that stuff? You kind of click through it, ready to put your information in and move on. I would say though, and my experience has said, that if you are somebody who is like, oh my gosh, I need to think about this, I need to know, you'll probably be all right. If you're somebody who takes care to show respect or have respect for yourself, or have that even insight to know that, oh my goodness, maybe I need to consider this. If you're thoughtful in that way, I'm going to bet that the odds are in your favor that your social media public profiles are not going to come back with anything too extreme or too messy for you. So the number one thing to do is, check your own accounts. Take a look at the stuff that you have. And I always say, be kind. Be kind.
I got to tell you, I think it's brilliant. I think it's, you've already answered the question, why can't you do your own reports? I think it's great. You strip out and what I heard just from the tech is you strip out the EEOC protected classes.
By federal and state. So not just EEOC,
state. Sure.
but yeah, state level as well.
Sure. So that's HR speak, folks. That's
yes.
So, all right. So let's just pivot real quickly. And I want to tell you a story.
I love stories.
Yeah. So here's the story, an HR story today. So I had someone that I know calls me today, and he tells me, and this is in regards to free speech, social media, what are your rights, and and I teach classes. So I'm a HR consultant, like I told you, and I teach a lot of employment law classes, HR law classes, and every time someone says, well, can I fire someone for what they wrote on Facebook or something like that? And my answer is, well, probably, maybe, yes, but it depends. That's like the answer I usually give them. But I had someone call me today, and he says to me, I lost my job. I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, last week they called me in HR, and they said, We've told you once before, no talking politics and berating people, making them feel badly about their political opinions or anything. And today's your last day. And he's shocked. He calls me, he says, Chuck, I know you're in HR. As I get this, hey, I know you're in HR. Can I ask you a question? And I said, sure. And he says, I think I'm going to sue him. He goes, they're offering him severance and all this stuff to sign off. Okay.
Sure.
It's pretty good severance. But I said, he tells me this story. He says, I'm going to sue them. He says, I think I could get him for $500,000. And I'm like, dude, I said, number one, you're in Florida. So it's an employment at will state. Number two, right? Take the severance. But what do you think about that? It's him saying, I'm going to sue. I got free speech. I have a right to free speech. My rights are being violated.
You certainly have a right to free speech, and you are not going to jail for that. But you can't work here. Is the answer from most employers. So, yeah, I mean, clearly there's a direct tie, and that's the thought when you talk about social media. Well, I can say whatever I want in social media. Okay, well, if you're saying I'm going to kill you on social media, there's consequences to that. Much like there's consequences of if you actually committed a crime outside of your work, it could, depending on what the crime was, be relevant to your job. And so freedom of speech is a tool for the government and potential, there's various legal cases, and I'm certainly no free speech expert in the broader sense. But in terms of, what it means for the workplace, well, workplaces are certainly legally able to have code of conduct policies and policies that support productive workplaces that are there to ensure that there is no hostility, harassment, bullying, that things are productive, and we're trying to create environments where people stay on the ball, and respectful environments, I think, is most of the intention behind a lot of that. And most of these time they're very obvious, like so much like the stuff that we flag for. It's like, don't harass people, don't do things. And so when people's behavior in the workplace does start to cross the line into disruptive and offensive to folks, and it's starting to create disruptions at work, regardless of the content of the conversation, that's a problem for an employer, right? And so that is the situation as well for social media. And you notice the categories of what I talked about, which people care about. Politics isn't one of them. Now, whether an organization has a right to not hire and fire you because of your political affiliation is one particular thing, but the disruption of what that conversation is, and of course, like it depends. It depends on what you're saying. It depends on how you're saying it. It depends on what the behavior is and what the consequence is. So that's why it's really important to have the context of when you're talking about social media screening. Again, this isn't just a keyword. If he likes this particular candidate or this, then we want to know, and we're not going to hire him. That's the problem with doing it yourself. You have your own political leanings, right? And so you look at somebody and you're like, oh, he voted for him. Ooh, like, no, thanks. But in an employment setting, it's beyond that. It's much more specific as to workplace related behavior and how that plays out. And so in social media screening too, we advise and we help our clients make sure that their code of conduct policies reflect social media policy, or create a social media policy. And we have lots of templates and stuff and all sorts of things that we do to help our clients if they don't have that kind of worked out. But generally speaking, it's turning that basic code of conduct into, this also matters for your public social media profiles too. Because guess what? It's happening in the workplace, and also companies are getting heat for this stuff. So if you're spouting off on social media about not liking certain groups of people or wanting to do harm to others, well, it's a problem for your company, and it creates damage, again, internally, externally. So these things, and much like your friend, and I have sympathy, but it sounds like he was warned. It's like, hey, dial it down. You are that is not workplace related conversations or appropriate. So please, maybe go post in a private chat group somewhere where that belongs, and not. And it's interesting, actually, it's a really good example. There's somebody else said to me once, we consider the social media problematic stuff just like somebody standing up in their cubicle and saying it out loud. It's now at the point where that it's the same level of concern for us. So we have to be careful about, how that stuff is managed, and policy. I always say documentation, consistency, and policy. You have to be consistent. So it's not fun for HR to do.
But what I heard you saying, and I know we're getting close to our time, but one of the things I heard you say that I liked is it sounds like you actually, and you have over 1,000 clients, I believe, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. So you have a large number of clients, big name clients, ladies and gentlemen, big name clients.
Yeah.
And it's not like someone calls and said, hey, can you do a social media profile on this? Or you're like, sure, let's move forward. Sounds like you actually say, well, tell me about the job. Tell me about your code of conduct. Tell me about the markers that you are, that are really relevant to you, your job, and your company. So it sounds like it's a customized thing in a way.
We try to make it not a heavy lift for our clients, right? So what we bring to the table is a lot of experience, and kind of like, this is how other people do it, right? And we say, look, here's the basic setup. Here's how other people do it. Here's what we know. And what's your operational structure like? Where do you need support? And customers come to us in a variety of situations. A common one is, we have a major problem. There's a fire and we have to do something about it now. So we'll help them scramble and get that social media policy and operationally make sure the disclosures and everything are all set, because the CEO is like, do this yesterday. Right. So that happens. And then there are some clients who are very thoughtful, want to be proactive, already are ahead of the game in some ways, and they just haven't kind of closed the loop here. So what we try to do is provide best practice advice and provide templates. Adjudication support's another part of it. What do I do when I actually have the report? How bad is this? Do I need to fire every single person once I get it? And so, we're like, we have your back. We have training programs and benchmarking reports and things that we can help you do that. And so clients can be in a variety of settings. And I would say for the most part, people are still, it's still new to them. So most of our clients are adopting these for the first time. And so, there's a little bit of an adjustment in just how to work it out. But again, I mean, I think, and I know a lot of the clients appreciate just that. Oh, okay, this is the way you do it. This is how you formalize it. Like, here's the process, and we can make this work. We're very minded and really unrivaled in terms of how we approach that client relationship, because at the end of the day, the outcomes of their what matters is the outcomes in their workplace, right? So is this going to make an impact? How does this make an impact? Does it support your diversity and inclusion initiatives? Is this part of an effort to support other types of initiatives that might be of importance or a priority right now? So we try to be really mindful and careful about exactly why somebody's doing it, and operationally support them in the best way we can.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, there's just so much. So I got to ask you one last thing. Is there anything that I missed? Any message you want to get out to the people listening today? Anything about you? Anything about your company? Anything about the whole social screening aspect overall?
Yeah. I think one thing that people think about is that there's a robot or some sort of, again, like fancy command F happening. And to some degree, yes. I mean, there's obviously artificial intelligence, machine learning, again, that studying of the behavior. cheers, studying of the behavior to know we need to zero in on this content quick, right? But we do employ people to review that, they're investigators, they're analyzing this stuff to make sure Alexa got it right. And so I think there's a technology conversation that's like a whole other podcast to consider. But I think that when you are thinking about this stuff, that, one of the right approaches, and certainly our approach, is to make sure it's accurate, right? And so if you're concerned about the accuracy or sort of things being taken out of context, that's fair. And you certainly have the right to look at your own report as a candidate, as an employer. If you're looking for a vendor, ask those questions about, how they weed through that stuff and how they work with different platforms in a compliant way, because that matters too. But, we'll just leave that little breadcrumb there, and certainly feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about it.
That's excellent. And I'm going to have some contact information in the show notes below. And I understand you have a special offer for our listeners, correct?
We do. Yes. So for podcast listeners, we went ahead and just said, you know what, let's give them discounted pricing for life. We'll set up continual pricing. We think that hey, try it for a certain standpoint is not as impactful as, here is your lowest possible cost, and that's going to make it operationally as easy for you as possible. So if you just go to socialintel.com/podcast, and we'll include the link, hopefully over to you, then just let us know that you heard us on the podcast, and we'll hook you up.
Yeah, the HR and Leadership Spotlight Show podcast and videocast. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, Bianca Lager, thank you for being on the show. Social intelligence, online background screening, just a really cool and fascinating field. Just a very cool and fascinating person, yourself.
Thank you.
So I'm excited to have you, and have a great day. Thanks for listening, folks.